need to go through as we're teaching. The first one is that introduction where we're providing the name and identifying the object. The second one is identification where we are just asking them to find it. We're still providing the language for them. And of course, that third period is mastery, and that's where we can say, what is that? And they can say, that's brown, or that's a square, or what have you. We use that same idea, that same principle in everything we teach. And it does, as Miss Ford mentioned yesterday, she thinks about that for Spanish, for her as an adult, that she can't come up with the words, but when other people speak it, she can identify what they're saying. She just can't reply back because she doesn't have mastery. She can just identify what it is that they're doing. It's true. These 3 steps are true for teaching everything from colors to our 2-year-olds all the way up through medical school and surgeons. We show them, this is how we do it. We guide them through it. Show me this, etc. And then finally mastery, they can do it on their own. And so with that same principle, then that's how we're going to introduce all of the things that we teach that are on cards or flashcards, etc. Now, of course, when we're talking about counting and so on and so forth, a lot of that is done through that I say it, you say it, I say it, you say it, I say it, you say it, chanting sort of repetition, which has a teaching foundation all the way back to the early years of Christ, that back and forth line. And of course, that's how we teach, most of the things that end up on the wall. But when it comes to flashcards, we're going to lay them out. We're going to identify them. We're going to ask them to find them where we're still supplying the name. And then we are going to finally get to the point where they can just say it. And so the first set of those kinds of cards that we're going to talk about is number recognition. And number recognition is one of the most difficult things for most children. Now, every now and then you'll get a kid who number recognition for them it's just, they come to it naturally. And if you do, that's lovely and wonderful. And I'm excited for them because that's a great gift that they don't have to struggle with that. But most of our kids, number recognition is incredibly difficult. And you can teach them 20 letters or sounds in the time that it takes for them to learn to recognize 10 numbers. It's a huge difference between the two skills. And so when we first start and introduce numbers and try to help them to see them, sorry, I should have done this beforehand. And this is the kind of thing, of course, you don't want to do in your circle time because you're losing focus and you're losing their attention and they're all going to wander off and look at other things and so on and so forth while you're sitting here sorting through flashcards. That's a no-no. All right, so I have the cards here that I've sorted, and these are 1 to 10, and these are our standard number recognition cards. Now, there are several different kinds of sets of number recognition cards that are floating around out there that I've made over the years that have numbers in different fonts. And you may have some of those as well. But one of the things that we want to do as we're teaching number recognition is to have them recognize a 1 in all of the different fonts that it can be in. So here you can see this one, he's got his hat, but he doesn't have his shoes. Sometimes we have a 1 that has a hat and shoes. So here you can see that one has both a hat and shoes. And same thing here and same thing here. They've got the hat and the shoes. And so I talked to them about the fact that number 1 can take his hat off and he's still number 1. And they need to learn to recognize number 1, whether he's got shoes on and a hat on or not. Because of course, when they get to handwriting them, especially if they're handwriting them with the hat, it's really, really, really easy to mistake a 1 for a 7. when they get to where they're handwriting them. And so when we teach how to write number one, we do not teach writing number ones with a hat and shoes. Absolutely not. A number one is just straight pull down. And so when you write number one on the board, you're going to write it like that. It's a straight pull down, and that's all there is to it. Okay, so when we first go to introduce this, we will talk about the fact that this is a 1 and this is a 2. And we have them, and we may very well, especially if we're dealing with 2-year-olds, just start off with a 1 and a 2. And when we introduce them, we'll talk about number 1, and we'll talk about the fact that he's straight up and down. See that? He's skinny and he's straight up and down. And this number 1 has a hat on it. But sometimes he doesn't have a hat, and he'll just be straight up and down like that. And sometimes he has shoes on him. And you can show them different ones. You can draw different ones on your board. All right, and when you do it, this is a 1. Is it still a 1? Yeah. How about now? Is it still a 1? What about if I take it down here and I put it on my shoe? Is it still a 1 down here? It is. What is this? This is a 1. All right. Let's see. What if I do this? What if I take it and I go under my knee? What is it? 1. That's right. Can you tell me what this is called?
1.
What is this called?
1.
What is this called?
A 1.
Good job. What is this called? 1. Excellent. You guys are so smart. This is a 1. All right. Now I'm going to set that down and I'm going to say, this is our other new number. This is a number 2. It has a hook at the top. Can you see the hook at the top? It reminds me of a coat hanger. Could you hang something in your closet if it had a big hook like that? You could, couldn't it? It would go right over the rod. It's got a hook at the top like a coat hanger. But look down here at the bottom. It has a flat bottom. Do you see that? If we set it down, it would just sit there, wouldn't it? It wouldn't rock side to side. It would sit nice and steady, wouldn't it? That makes it a 2. A 2 has a hook at the top, but it's nice and flat at the bottom. This is a 2. What is this? What is this?
2.
What is this?
2.
What is it now?
2.
What if I put it down here? What is it?
2.
2. Okay. Let's look at it again. This is a 1. This is a 2. 1, 2. All right. Let's see if I can trick you. Are you ready? This is a 1. Now, you'll look at me when I'm doing it. I'm putting my mouth in the shape of the first sound, and I'm holding it there for just a second before I actually start saying it. Because the kids who have difficulty with the memory with the words, we're going to go off topic for just a moment. But the human brain has a slide with an amazing feature. It's called the mirror feature. And what it means is that if I walk up to you and I smile, you want to smile back. What you see, you want to mirror. If I walk up to you and I am scowling, angry, upset, you're going to mirror that seriousness, that level of it. You're not likely to look over and start laughing, with somebody who's walking up to you who's clearly upset, unless you happen to know there's a joke going on or so on and so forth. But that's not human nature. Human nature is you see somebody smile, you want to smile. When you see somebody crying, you immediately start to sympathize and to feel those same emotions. This is especially true in toddlerhood. One child can get hurt and then the whole class is in tears. And that's that mirror gene, it promotes it within it. That mirror gene really comes and helps when it comes to teaching, especially if you're using errorless learning, or whatever it is, the mirror trait, that instinctual need to mirror. If you are talking to somebody and you want to create a connection, especially if it's like somebody new, salespeople use this a lot, you mirror their body language. So like if somebody is, sitting back and they're a little reserved, then you're going to copy that. And, if they start to feel like you're speaking their language or making a connection, they'll lean more into you, and you copy that too. You mirror it and move into you, move into them. That mirroring of body language, of expression, so on and so forth. Even micro expressions, the very small, subtle, like winces and so on and so forth that happen when there's unexpected stimulation of any kind, where you just have that instinctual gut response. Mirroring those kinds of things can make all the difference in how somebody feels about an encounter. And so we're going to use that instinctual mirroring to help our children learn. And of course, we talked yesterday, and we may get to go into some more detail as this training goes on about errorless learning. And basically, it's this idea that we don't need to practice the wrong answers. We don't want to let them finish and go all the way through and explore the wrong answer and cement that wrong answer into their head. We want to supply or circumvent, interrupt the wrong answer and supply the right one so that they're practicing only the right things. If every time I call on you and I ask you what this is and you tell me it's green, right? And I just let you say it, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm so sorry. That's not green. Look at that. I've said it again. I've reinforced it. That's a 2. Every time you say green, I don't know why you say green. How many times am I reinforcing this? Okay. What am I doing there? I'm telling him green 400 times while he's looking at this input. No wonder he says green, right? Okay, but if I say, what is this? And he starts to say grr, and I say 2, guess what? You're going to help him. So whenever I'm saying this is I put my mouth in the shape, in the position for it, and I pause just a second before I say this is a 2. This is 1. Okay? I'm helping them because they want to mirror where my mouth is, and what comes out naturally at that point is going to be the right thing. Now, of course, this doesn't work if you're dealing with 2 things that start with the same sound. But unconsciously, they will pick up and start mirroring your expression as they're looking for the right answer. Kids, especially in group learning situations, are excellent at faking knowing things. They look at the kid who knows what's going on, and they copy them. They end up being like a slight echo, just a beat behind them. And if we can use that to help them to learn the right answers on their own, then we need to take advantage of that. So it's important to have that. Yes, ma'am.
I noticed that during my testing, some of the kids, instead of telling me, like, for example, a number 5, when I would show them 5, I'd say, what is this? Instead of saying that's number 5, they would say, oh, he has a flat head and he has a round body, and they couldn't tell me it was a 5 though. So what am I doing wrong? Am I like repeating too much, like what the 5 looks like, instead of like saying 5, 5, 5 over again?
They probably just needed to hear the word more often.
Okay.
But the fact that they were able to identify and separate out and single out the characteristics of it mean that they're getting to the point that they're ready to learn to supply it. But they just weren't at mastery yet.
Okay.
I bet if you told them, find the 5, when you supplied the word, they could do that. Okay. But they weren't at the mastery where they could produce that word. And that's just, it's practice. Right. And that, again, that step, for some things it's invisible. We go from 1 to 2 to 3 with almost no effort, but for some things it takes a long time. There's a word that I've really wanted to learn, and that sounds really strange, but it's in a book that I've read many times, because I reread the same books over and over again, especially if they're a series. I'll reread all the books that come before the book in the series when a new book in the series is released. And some of the series that I've reading they've been publishing books for 30 years now. So there's a lot of them that come beforehand. But in one of the books that I reread every time there's a new book in the series, they use the word coccygodyneus.
What kind of books are you reading?
This is the Outlander series, actually. Okay. For those of you, it's a cable show. I haven't actually ever seen the show. I understand it's very. I haven't seen it, I just know. I understand it's very, it's along Games of Thrones. They put a lot of nudity into them whenever they're on those platforms. And I've read the Game of Thrones books, but I haven't seen that series either. There's a lot less sex in the books than there are in the movies, but there's definitely, it's still there. But anyway, the main character is a time traveler. She's a nurse from 1945, like whatever, and she gets taken back through time to the 1700s. And then eventually she returns to her present, and then ends up going back again. And in the meantime, while she's in the present, she becomes a doctor. But at one point, her daughter is talking about how her mother describes the hospital board as Coccygadinians. I see, and I'm not quite at this mastery stage. I'm gonna get there. It's the medical term for a pain in the region of the backside or the tailbone. Yes, it's the proper name for a marked pain in your rear. And I just think that's hilarious, and I would love to learn this word. And I've been introduced to it a number of times. I can identify it when she says it. I know what it's going to mean, but I'm not quite at the mastery where I can just spout it off. But I think that's an excellent word to have in my vocabulary. I need to know this word, but it's, I'm not quite there, So we do have these phases, and that what you're talking about there is you're talking about kids who probably can identify, but they're not quite at the mastery. And they'll get there. You just got to practice it.
Yeah, one more question, sorry. When testing and a child gets the answer wrong, do I need to correct them even during testing? Or
I don't. In testing, no.
Okay.
You just tell them, great job, and I really appreciate it. And I will tell you that, and this is actually a really important thing. I know Cody Bear was telling Miss Corvera that he needed to, she could just put a check mark there. He didn't know what the opposite of that was, but she could just put a check mark on her paper. Yeah. And he didn't know that one either, but she could put a check mark there. One of the things that we do, especially when you get into like kindergarten age, when they become very conscious of writing, is that if they know it, then it becomes a check with a circle around it. And if they don't, it's an X with a circle around it. And so you're writing in response to everything that they say.
Right.
It's not reserved for the things they get right or the things that they miss. They become very conscious of you writing on your paper. And so this is really important. This is what Kinder uses, right? Yes. When I'm testing a child in my office, I use a slash or a check. But it's the same thing. This would be even better for preschoolers because to them they would look identical. Something inside a circle, they're not going to be able to see the subtle differences there. They wouldn't even if they saw somebody else's testing, wouldn't have a clue whether or not they got it right or not got it right. But that can be helpful to mark it like that. But no, in testing, whatever they do, that's great. That's awesome. Good work. I appreciate you working hard. And it's really important, we were talking about developing a work ethic. So whenever the children test with me or do anything like that with me, it's very important to recognize their effort and to brag on the fact that they worked so hard, not that they got everything right or that they know everything. Yeah. I mean, that's good if they do, but at the same time, we want to brag on how hard they worked because that is something that we really want to encourage and develop within for the kiddos.
Yeah, I started making testing necklaces where everybody get one on Friday because they took a test.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a necklace they get to wear home that I tested today. And I thought they liked that.
Yeah.
Or if they're like hitting a wall, because the testing can go on a while.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, you're doing so good, you're so smart. Oh my gosh, you're doing so good, even if they've gotten everything wrong.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh, you're doing such a good job, you're so smart. And they get so excited, and then they like want to finish. They want you to ask them more questions because they're just like, look at me, I'm so smart, and I'm getting all of them right. And that's how I usually get them through it when they're bored.
Yeah, when they start to get fatigued.
Mm-hmm.
when you get to the point in the school year, especially where there's a lot of information that you're having to test on, because I mean, the first months, you haven't introduced hardly anything, come count for me, and they count to 5. I mean, that doesn't take very long. By the time you're counting to 55, it takes a lot longer to listen to them count, especially because when they're in that insecure knowledge place on testing, every number is like pulling teeth. I mean, they are really having to think. And the ones who are borderline and just about to get it, they can process and think their way through it. It takes a long time at that point when they're struggling through it. Now, when they get it down and it's pat, then even that goes a lot faster than that sort of like, they sort of have it and they're getting there, but they have to stop and think on every single number. That really is time when it gets to be a lot. And if so, then it may be that you want to move something in your testing to a preliminary day. And that's fine as long as you're waiting a week between it and then using that to move on from it. But, if you want to make sure that everybody remembers their 10 basic colors, and that's what you're going to test on is the 10 basic colors, then you can do that on Mondays while they're on the playground. And as long as you do it every Monday, and you don't go, oh, I tested on Friday last week, I'm going to test on Monday this week, and then I'm not going to test for 2 weeks because I'm going to test on Friday again, that's too far between the check-ins that testing gives us. But you may want to spread it out once you get into that later in the year when things are starting to add up. Okay, so back to my 1 and my 2 here. We've talked about this, we've introduced it, we've played our little game, and I'm going to keep them in the correct order as I'm doing this. I'm going to keep 1 in front of 2. Mixing them up and asking them to identify is harder than having them in the order. So when I move into that identification thing first, I'm going to keep them in that order. This is a 1, this is a 2. Where's the 1? Now what I'm doing here is I'm giving a nonverbal cue to the right answer. Where's the 1? Okay, and point to the 1 for me, please. Right? Point to the 2. Where's the 2? Okay, when I'm asking the children to come up and touch the 1, I'm going to give that nonverbal cue. Now, of course, if I have Super Sally and she already knows this, I don't need to give Super Sally that nonverbal cue. But Slow Joe, I may be giving that nonverbal cue for a very long time, right? And then, oh my goodness, my brain. I forgot what I was going to say. All right, so once we've gotten it to where we've gone through and they can find the 1, they can find the 2, they can point to the 1, they can point to the 2, then we'll start mixing them up. Where's the 1? Where's the 2? All right, let's see. I'm going to mix them up even further, okay? Are you ready? All right, if the 1 is on top, you're going to point to the sky. If the 1 is on the bottom, you're going to point to the ground. All right, let's see. Where's the 1? Oh, good job. Where's the 2? Good job. All right, let's see. Where's the 1? Where's the 2? Excellent. All right, so you get that idea of what they're doing. Now, of course, you're going to have kids who are just looking at each other to see where they're pointing. But it's another way of doing the identification. You can have everybody close their eyes and open them and point, or whatever. You can even have them, sometimes you can have them hide it. And then on 3, you can let them, all right, okay, you're going to show me which way you're pointing. And you can already tell because of the way that they're holding their hands, but they really like to be surprised, Okay, those are fun things that you can do there too. But finding the 1, finding the 2, again, when you move on to it and you start saying, this is a 1, this is a 2. All right, now we're at mastery. And so we are at, sorry, we got comedy going at the door. Okay, all right. Let's see if we can remember our numbers, all right?
1, 2.
Good job. What's that one? Excellent. All right, so we would go all the way through this. Then I would introduce them again. I would do that identification step again. I would do the mastery step again. And at this point, I would think everybody's got 1 and 2, you know, because we've been through it twice and it seems like they can say it. And in testing, they seem to be getting it right. So I think I'm ready to move on, and I'm finally ready. And I'm so excited because I get to add the 3. So exciting, right? And as soon as I add the 3, then they no longer know the 2, because what they've learned is 1 and not 1. So then, guess what? Now I've thrown in this one. They can't tell the difference between the 2 of them. What they can do is they can tell that neither one of these is the 1. So if it's not 1, then the answer must be 2, no matter what it is. So we're going to have to go back again and do that introductory phrase all over again. And we're going to have to do all of the description all over again and teach them, because now we have, you know, before I talked about 2 being flat on the bottom and that it sits straight and it wouldn't rock at all. When we look at the 3 is going to rock. Now, when I taught these, can't remember which room it is. I had the numbers in my, on the math shelf. They're like the wooden, like house numbers. So they're like 3-dimensional, like wood ones, you know, and you could literally stand the numbers up and you could rock the 3 back and forth. And so you could show that one, you know, would rock and the 2 wouldn't. I mean, you know, in all honesty, you could cut that out of like fun foam, or even like cardboard, where you could hold that number up and rock it versus putting it flat and help them to see that. But most of the time they will get it with that. But we need to teach them about that straight bottom versus that curved bottom. And when they get to 5, then we're going to have to teach them that the curve on the 5 can rock and he's flat on the top. Right? And 2 does not rock because he's flat on the bottom. The 2 is flat on the bottom. Okay, pointing all these things out as you're teaching them, as you introduce them the first time, helps, because you're going to have to call back on it whenever you're getting to the subsequent numbers. And so when you get to the point that they've learned 1 and not 1, then you have to go back all over again, 1 and 2 and 3, and introduce them all over again. Now, in addition to the straight numbers like this, we also have our number poem. And these cards have a little saying, and we teach them the saying with it. But as we're doing it, we don't just want them to learn the poem. We want them to learn the characteristics of the numbers as they're doing it. And so we'll talk about the different aspects of it. And on these cards themselves, we have several different tools to help us. One is that we have the 1 in many different fonts across the bottom. We have it written. Here we have the word spelled out. Is it okay to tell them that? Yes, absolutely. That's its name all spelled out. But we don't have to spell its name out with all those sounds. Instead, we can just write 1. But can we spell it out? Sure, we could. And you'll learn how to do that when you get to 1st grade. But right now, all we have to do is write 1. And we're going to start at the top and pull down. Okay? Is there anything wrong with having them write it in the air? 1. No, absolutely not. It's a very good idea to have them write it in the air as you talk about how you make it. All right, over here you can see that we have a 10 frame, and the 10 frame has the dots in it. And can you count the dots in the 10 frame? Sure. Is it too early to introduce them to that concept? Nope. They're going to see it all through if they're going, you know, when they get into school. And then over here you can see that we have a domino. And again, it's got that dot. Can you show them that in a domino? Absolutely. Can you talk about it as well? Sure. Those are all aspects that you can use to continue your discussion of 1 and introduce them to them. All right, when we get into number 2, then you can see here that we've got all the different 2s. And the one in the middle is how we teach the children to write the numbers. But if you'll look, you'll see that the number 2 here is tall. When we actually get into kinder, 1st grade, etc., and we're writing on the dot line paper like this, We teach them to write their numbers on only the lowercase. Then we don't make them tall. But they are shown tall here, and that's okay. That helps them to see them more than anything else. And you can see over here, like this one has the loop in the 2. These were picked really specifically to kind of show them the differences in how some people write 2s. And so that's something I talked to them about early on, that we write a 2 like this. Sometimes people write it with a little curve in the middle. Is that okay? They can. That's not the way we're going to write it, is it? No, but do we still know that it's a 2? Yes. Are they going to trick us if they write it like that? No, we're still going to know it's a 2. And so then we'll talk about all that number 2 in my shoe. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about these. We did go through and update these. I did a few years back. And for those of you who've been teaching it step by step since before the update, I'm sorry. I know that it's hard to...
I cannot adapt to the number 5 does the jive.
Yeah.
I want to still say in the eye.
I know, but
Always correcting me, but don't tell me. Oh, you're right.
It is. Number 5 does the jive. It's my fault. It really bothered me that 5 and I do not rhyme. And as we're trying to teach kids to actually rhyme, it really bothered me that number 5 and I do not rhyme. And then we get to 6, and 6 and 9 were the other 2 that I changed. And it was very purposeful when I did it. Number 6 on his circle sits, because I wanted them to have that prompting for the fact that 6 sits on the circle. And then number 9 is a balloon on a line, so the circle's at the top. And it was to try to help keep those, with that. And so, again, the point of these is to help to explain and to do it. Now, your number poem cards are often, they're going to go faster with saying these and doing this than they are with the actual number recognition. You don't have to wait on the number poem, you don't have to wait on them being able to identify these numbers to move on in the number poem. They're independent of each other. The straight number recognition is going to take them a lot longer. And you don't introduce a new one here just because you've gotten to a new one here. You may be all the way to 10 on this, but still be only identifying 3 on this, and that's okay. We'd much rather that they really identified 3 on this, even if they're ready to go through, because the pictures here helped to prompt the memory. It makes it much easier for them to remember. So that is going to be much easier for them than this one. Yes?
I think also the number chant always stays in order. I noticed that when I was testing my kids, I thought that they had it down like 1 through 5. I was like, they mastered it, we're ready to move on. And then I jumbled them up, and they had nothing.
Yeah, they didn't.
Once I changed the order of the number recognition, they had no idea. So I had to start over.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and being in order is so much easier than being out of order. It really is, and it does. It makes a big difference. All right, so let's go through and let's say these together, if you don't mind, so that we can get the rhythm, so that everybody can hear it and it's recorded. Number 1, on the run. Number 2, in the shoe. Number 3, in the tree. Number 4, at the door. Number 5, does the jive. Number 6, on a circle sits. Number 7, up in heaven. Number 8, on a plate. Number 9, a balloon on a line. And number 10, a big fat hen. That's right. I really do. I think I did a good job on the pictures, by the way.
Did you make the picture?
Uh-huh.
Aw.
Yes, I like, started with the word art and then had to, actually, yeah. I'm proud of myself for these. I think they turned out pretty cute. Okay, so number recognition. Is there anything else there that I've forgotten? Yes.
So how far do you go with the number recognition until you mix them up?
I would mix them up in between every step. So like when I'm doing 1 and 2, I wouldn't introduce 3 until I can randomly pull them and do 1 and 2. And when I introduced 3, then I would mix all of them up and see if we could find 1, see if we could find 2, see if we could find 3. And then I would start, can you say, 1, 2, and 3. And of course, finding it is the pre-step, and, being able just to say what the name of it is the, is the goal. But there's a big gap between those two.
And every time you add a new number, you start all over again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 5, and then mix them up again? Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes when I'm teaching a new number, like let's say that today is the day I'm going to introduce 5. Then I'll start off with, all right, let's go ahead and let's see if we can remember our numbers. Oh, let's see. All right, this is 3, 2, 4.
Super silly over here.
We have a new number today. Look at that. It got snuck into my pile. That must mean that we're ready for a brand new number. Oh my goodness. Some of us already know the name of this number, but let's talk about it. This is a 5. It's our brand new number. Look at that. We know it's new because it looks completely different than our other numbers. Number 5 is flat on the top. Can you see that? And he has a long straight neck right there. Can you see his long straight neck? And then look right here. He's got a big fat round bottom. That's so silly. So he's got a flat head on the top and a long skinny neck there and a big fat round bottom. And he is number 5. Look at that. When I hold him like this, he can rock back and forth. In fact, it looks like he's dancing. You know that there's a funny word for dancing. It's called the jive. Yeah, dancing is called the jive. So when we look at our number poem, we talk about number 5. And we talk about number 5 doing the jive. He can dance like that. He can do the jive because he's round on the bottom. Okay, so this is our number 5. All right, and what's this one? 1. All right, now let's see if we can do it again. Let's see if we can do this again. All right, let's try it again. Number 4. 1. This is our new one. What is it? It's a 5. All right, let's say it again. That's a 5. What number is that? It's a 5. What number is that? It's a 5. All right, now you'll notice when I'm presenting there, and this is off topic of number cards, but it's very important, is that I am presenting here, and then I move it, and I am presenting here, and then I move it, and I am presenting here. And the reason for that is that panning, the slow movement like this, it's much more difficult to focus and to read and to see when something is in movement. And so when we present things, whether it be a story that we're reading or information cards, what we need to do is make sure that we present and hold, we present and hold, and we present and hold. We need to make sure that every child can see it. Most of the time when we set up our circles, we end up with a child who is like directly to our right. Guess what? They're not going to see anything that I'm holding up here. Okay? That is very hard for them. Or they may be right there. Okay? That's very hard for them. We need to make sure that when we're setting up our circles, not only is there a space for everybody, but that everybody can see. And we need to make sure that when we're holding things, that we make sure that we turn and turn and turn. Because if you can't see what somebody's talking about, that's immediate misbehavior.
Yes.
If it is a struggle to see what you're talking about, I'm going to so lose focus and start misbehaving. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. Okay, let me think. Is there anything else about number recognition? Okay. All right. I see that we've got a few people getting up. Let's go ahead and break for just a few minutes, and everybody can go potty, and then we'll come back and we will move on.
About 5 minutes ago.
Oh,
Text
okay.
for a while.
Oh, okay.
Miss Obar, I'm glad to see you today. Okay, we talked about number recognition. If you're following along on our sheet with the older group lessons, you'll see that the next thing is language and reading readiness, and it mentions the sounds next. Talking letters, felt letters, playing swallow the sound. I'm going to save my discussion about those things for the day when we're introducing reading readiness and talking about sounds overall. So I will tell you that you will do your sounds in circle time, and you would do them at this point in circle. But we're going to move on from our lesson and just kind of skip over that, and we'll come back to it whenever we have a day just to devote to sounds, because that takes a whole lot. And we're going to finish introducing the general knowledge and the flashcards right now. So after that, then the next thing underneath that language and reading readiness are the environmental print awareness cards. And the set of those that we have currently out involve logos of stores and restaurants. And so you can see here we've got McDonald's, Target, Chick-fil-A, Sonic, Buc-ee's. Why do we want them to know logos? Is it because we're huge fans of Madison Avenue and advertising, and we feel like that we need to worship at the foot of the advertising dollar? No. Well, part of it is definitely the area. But environmental print awareness, or becoming aware of the writing in the environment around you, is one of the most important pre-reading skills. And knowing what things say, that those are letters, those are words, and when they're arranged in this certain way, they say a certain thing. This is a huge pre-reading skill. This is the same idea that we use whenever we label items in the classroom. Sometimes it just depends, but in the 4-year-old year, it can be very good to label things with the names of what they are. So in the home center, you write home center, and it's posted up. And in the blocks, you write blocks. Or a table can be labeled a table, and a chair can be labeled a chair. Are we asking them to be able necessarily to read that? No. But can they learn to recognize that? Absolutely. Now here we're recognizing professional logos, right? And of course, these are a little bit easier than some things because there's color involved, there's a shape. Oftentimes there are the pictographs within the logo itself can help to prompt what it is. So for example, when I introduce Domino's Pizza, I'm going to talk about the fact that that's a domino at the top, and that this is a domino that has 1 dot on one side and a 2 dot on 2 sides. And guess what? I'm going to talk about the fact that there's a domino right there, and this domino only has a 1. And I might even bring a real set of dominoes and see if we can find this domino within the set. And that's Domino's Pizza. And when we get the pizza box, of course, the box has the same picture on the top of it, right? And all of those steps that go with it. Some of them, of course, are much easier to recognize. When I get to this one, can I just tell you that it shocks me the number of children that we have that wear this logo on their shirt and don't know what it means, don't know what it says. They don't have a clue. And one of the words on our word list that is very difficult for them is school. Yeah, they don't know what that word is. They can't read it. And yet they wear it right there every day, but they can't read the word school. And it really does surprise me every time that they don't know what that is, even though it's in their thing. So making them aware of it and helping them learn to see it and to understand that, this says step and this says by and this says step. So step by step. Talk about all the things within them. Don't, obviously we want them to learn to recognize it as a whole, but talk about the elements that make it up. And you can talk about the fact that there are steps in there and that there's a cross, and we have a cross because we're Christians, right? And the cross is about Jesus, and that we're a school, so we have a bell, like the teacher's bell, and that's why it's step by step, Christian, and then school, right? Go ahead and talk about those things. Of course, our Disney store is closing at Willowbrook. I'm sad about that. Mm-hmm. Have y'all ever taken your kids to the Disney store when it opens?
It's a whole hooray. It's a whole party.
It is.
Yes.
Yes, you have to bring the magic back to the store, and it's a whole big thing. They clap and they turn on. And
you wear one of the kids gets to wear like the wizard hat
and the Mickey gloves and
the wand and
yeah, it's a big thing. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't ever done that, you should definitely do that with your child.
that was pre-COVID.
Yeah. I doubt they're doing it right now too, but
That used to be Maddie's favorite store in the whole world. And my mom's.
it's still my favorite. Yeah, it's still one of my favorites. I just love it. It's fun. All right, and so as we're doing these again, we're learning to recognize them as they're driving. They get very excited when they see the places that they know. They get very excited. And sometimes you can have kids who will tell you, I drive past the Walmart and then I go past the Wells Fargo and then I go past the whatever it is, Chick-fil-A or whatever, and then we get to my house. And they can tell you from the logos and those kind of sight marks how to get to their house. What logo recognition does Cody have on his way home? How does he know that he's almost home? Well, if you've been traveling away from home, Buc-ee's is going to be his. But on the way from school to home, what does he see?
He does see loves, the hearts.
He sees the Love's truck stop with the hearts.
That we're close when he-
And that's what he says when he sees them. It's we're
Big hearts. We're at the big hearts.
yeah, we're almost home. Yeah. And so, of course, here we have lots of different things for lots of different of our local ones. And these would, of course, they change over time as stores change. When we lost Toys R Us, I took Toys R Us out of the mix because...
We have it in the butterfly space.
Yeah, I have it in the Dolphin.
Oh, yeah, you need to... they're not big...
And all the kids pause when we get to that one.
Yeah.
And I told them, I said, it's because, guys, it's been gone, and you guys were very young when
yeah.
went away.
You can pull that card out and throw it away. They don't need to recognize it anymore. Buffalo Wild Wings, we've got one of those here in town. If they closed, then we, pull it out. It's not in there. It's not something that they're going to be exposed to. So these are, as I said, restaurant and stores. These are location ones. I am working on several new sets of environmental print awareness cards. I've got one set going that is a matching set, and so there is the print logo of different toy brands. So Lego, Barbie,
Fisher Price.
But and then the other one is the picture of the toy itself, like Lego bricks or a Barbie doll. And so that you can play a game where you match the two of them in circle. I've got another one that is also a matching set of going together kind of a set of the environmental print awareness that is kids' movies. So like the Frozen logo, because they have a very distinct text. And then the answering one is the, characters from the movie or a scene from the film. And then another one that I've got going is food and beverage brands, like the Coca-Cola logo, and then of course a Coke bottle or a Coke can. When I talk about these, at first, when I introduce them, I just talk about like what it is, that this is McDonald's, and you can see here that they call that the golden arches, and it's 2 humps, and it makes a big and that's because when we eat at McDonald's, we say because it's so good, right? Because anyway, McDonald's is not on my new modified taste plan at all. Yeah, it's not, my friend. Yeah. I used to really like McDonald's French fries, like, be obsessed with them and could eat my weight in. Yeah. Not anymore, unfortunately. But I'll talk about that, and we'll get to the point that we can recognize McDonald's. And with something like this, as I'm talking about it, I might even bring in one of the little fry cup things, and it has the M on the front of it, or a wrapper, and show them that the M is printed on it, and that, look at that. They want you to know that means they're restaurants, and so they put it on everything. And that's a great way to introduce it and to help them to be aware of the fact that they are seeing this all the time. The Happy Meal box where the handles make the golden arches. That's a great thing to show them, and to practice with that. And again, introduce them to it. Now, as they get better at this and they're getting to the point that they can consistently tell you what it is, then you can start to play a game. And you can start to play a game where, for example, you put out 3 or 4 of your cards. And now at this point, I'm not only using the logo recognition, I'm also using some logic and reasoning, all right? So I tell them, well, I have to run some errands, and I need to go and I need to buy some hamburger and some French fries. Where would I go if I have these 4 choices and I need to get a hamburger and some French fries? Which one would I go to? And, ask them to find it. And, of the 4 I've laid out here, I've got Buc-ee's, McDonald's, Domino's, and Target. And, of course, I'd be looking for McDonald's with that one. And now I'd say, oh, you know what? Now I have a different errand. I need to go out and I need to buy a toy for a birthday party. So I can give it a toy as a present for a birthday party. Where would I go to buy a toy for a birthday party? Now, somebody might say Buc-ee's. And I would say, you know what? You're right. You could buy a toy for a birthday party there. What's the other place you could buy a toy for? And somebody else is going to say Target. And they're going to be more familiar with that, particular one. And, if they tell you something else and it happens to be true, for example, if I said I needed to go buy some Diet Coke and I had H-E-B and Home Depot on there, and somebody said, oh, we got a Diet Coke at Home Depot. They actually do sell them. So do I recognize that as being okay? Sure, absolutely. Because, there again, but that reasoning and that logic of these are the things that I need and this is where I would go to get them, that is a huge advanced step in their thinking and their knowledge. And of course, it's practical too for them to think about where you go to get certain things. All right. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I tell them like with Miss Erin, I always make fun of her that she goes to Walgreens too much.
Oh.
So I taught them because they had a hard time with CVS and Walgreens. I'm like, this is Miss Erin's favorite store. What is it called? Is that appropriate?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And they all make fun of her when she comes back with that.
I love their photo. I get my pictures there.
Yeah.
That's my excuse.
Yeah. Well, they do carry quite a bit. There's one out by my house, and there's not really any other store besides a gas station out by my house. So I am well aware of the wide variety of materials that Walgreens carries. Because, it's much easier. Going. Yeah.
My favorite is Buc-ee's.
Yeah, that's what I did with mine. When Hobby Lobby came around, this is his little favorite store.
Yeah.
When I go to Wells Fargo, I say, I've been here. I tell them.
Yeah, exactly.
That way they know.
Yeah, and I relate it to them. Absolutely. When Stephanie was here and she did this with her cards, every time that H-E-B came up, that was her favorite store. And of course, at the time she was living with me, and so, every now and then, once a week or sometimes more, but usually at least once a week she would make dinner, and it was the Stephanie special, and the Stephanie special was whatever the H-E-B meal deal was for that week. So whatever it was that they had on special, you buy the hot dogs and you get the buns or whatever it was. It didn't matter. That was what we were eating that week, because that was, she loved to go to the grocery store. I was very grateful to have somebody who wanted to go to the grocery store because I don't like shopping. All right. So from that, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on. We're going to skip, as I said, the sounds, and we're going to skip Distar also. And because that is a completely separate and very involved training all of its own. We're going to move on to shapes. And you can see here that we start teaching shapes with star, heart, and circle. And we start with star and heart because most of the kids have already learned those. That's an easy one that they pick up very quickly. And so when we when we begin, it's easy to put out star and heart and to get those. And so really what they're having to learn at that point is circle. There it is. All right. And when we teach these, and you can see here that these cards have a yellow background and the shape is in black. And that was something that we implemented a few years back because we actually had there's a study out that said that the black on the yellow is an easier contrast for the children to see than the white background was. And so at that point, then we went through and we put in the black on the back. Now, again, on these, this is something that we have that's a standard set for the school. Are there other sets out there? Absolutely. Can you use them? Yes, but they shouldn't be your primary ones. You can teach them, I mean, you can have multiple sets of shapes, that's okay. But we want to make sure that we are using these sets because otherwise there's not necessarily consistency. And the reason I say that is that most of the time if you go to the teacher supply store and you buy a set of shape cards, every shape is in a different color. The heart's going to be red, the star's going to be yellow, the circle's going to be purple, the square's going to be orange. Well, guess what? Are they learning the shape and to identify the shape, or are they learning the color? I don't know. And I can't tell for sure because it's very identifiable when it has those colors. And so by having them all be in the black, then that helps. Now, these cards have not been cut out. They are flat on the card. That can help them to learn to identify the edges because once you put the object and it's just by itself, for some kids, when you add that dimension, it can be hard for them to see it. Does that mean you can't have a set of shape cards that are cut out? No, of course you can have that. But we want to make sure that you're using this set also. So make sure that you do have one of these, and the same thing with the number recognition cards. Yes, you can use the other ones, but let's use those as the primary ones that we introduce from and then add the others to them. Yes, you had a question?
So I have like the white ones. So you want that on the board and for us to show? That's where I'm confused. Because I have both sets.
You have both?
Yeah, and I have the other ones on the board and show those in circle.
That's fine.
Okay.
Let's try to transition everybody to making sure that we're showing these in circle. But if yours are the old ones that I had made previously that were white on the background, then we need to upgrade you to the newer set. But it is helpful if we, like, again, consistency, if we're all using the same kind of thing. So,
Just a curiosity question. I don't put the shapes on my board anymore, but when I was over there on the other side, I just put the shape itself.
that's fine. Yeah, and we put them on the board so the parents know what we're doing. We don't really teach them from the board. I mean, the only things that we usually teach from the board are days of the week, months of the year, rote counting. Is that it? Everything else we actually do in our hands. Everything else that goes on the board is going to be, it's going to be there so the parents know where we are and what we've introduced. And I got to tell you that it really irritates me to walk into a room in May and it's still the teaching board is the exact same as it was the first day of school. Be sure and update your board as you introduce the new concepts. I mean, it really does just take a staple or a little ticky tack, but it's good to keep that up so that the parents do know that we have been teaching them things, because otherwise they have no idea what we've introduced because they don't read the newsletter. I wish they did, but they don't. No. No, they don't. Life is very busy, and so for a lot of us, we need a picture, and that's true for them too. Oh,
The new thing card that they have, up with all of the shapes on it, it's very confusing to me. Cause to me it's out of order of how we teach it. The long one with all the shapes on there. So should we not use that?
you can use it. That was really meant for when you get to the point that you have lots of them that have been introduced, and to what's this, what's that. Yeah,
Got it.
that's really what it was meant for. Yeah. It was certainly not meant to teach from because it is confusing.
Yeah,
But once you get to the point that they're,
at the mastery.
and you're reviewing,
Review.
it was meant for so I usually put the 12 months of the year up,
Okay.
but I may not. Okay, so you don't have to have a calendar on the wall in the room at the preschool age, like the calendar that says August, or whatever with the numbers on it and all that. You don't have to have that on the wall. But almost always we end up wanting to put one on the wall because they're nice for us, I mean, it's nice to have a calendar where you can see it, and it's nice to have it match your set and, fill out your room and be part of it. I mean, it's not one of our required bulletin boards though. But usually the set matches the teaching board and it's going to be somewhere over there. So I sometimes will use the set of month names that come with with that calendar set. I'll put them all beside it, and then I just move the correct one to the month and then put it back. And so when I do that, then all of my months are up the whole time and they're seeing them. And I'm working my way through them. So with those, if I'm doing that and I'm going to use that as my months of the year, then they're all up the whole time from the beginning. If it's all on one poster, like if I have a poster that says the months of the year and it's all one, then the whole thing goes up, and I may cover up the part that I'm not teaching yet, but it's definitely all up because it's all one big long poster. But if I have a set of month names and I'm not, it's separate from my calendar and it's not all in one poster, then I might just, at the beginning of the year, I might put up the 7 days of the week, the header title, and nothing underneath it because I'm going to put them up as I teach them. And then I might have the header title for the 12 months of the year and nothing underneath it because I'm not teaching that yet. And then I would add each row as I taught it. It's really going to depend on what my set looks like, whether or not I've got it all displayed from the beginning. But if it all comes in one poster, and especially if I just went to the store and bought a new teaching set or whatever and it came in all one poster, I'm not going to cut my brand new set into strips so I can put it up there in strips. I'm going to put the whole poster up, and then I'm going to make a cover out of white poster board or coordinating whatever and cover up part of it, with ticky tack so I can pull it off when I get to it. And that's just going to be because, I'm not going to take something I just purchased and tear it up. And I don't want to put 45,000 staples in something that I just bought either, because I just bought it. So that's, I know that's not a direct, straight answer, but hopefully that kind of gives you an idea.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, I was just thinking, I've had it up the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Wasn't it supposed to?
No. I definitely, I don't see a problem with it at all. In fact, I don't see a problem with, there's part of me that thinks that you could put up all of your color cards and then cover the colors you're not teaching yet up with a Post-it or whatever, and then pull them off as you get to them, and reveal them. There's something about that would be very fun too, Yeah, sort of like a scratch off, you know? Wouldn't it be awesome if you had a scratch off circle board, you know, and you could let's find out what their next one's gonna be.
Man, you can make millions with that idea.
That would be like super fun. Yes, we could, you know, create a preschool that feeds right into gambling addicts. It's great. But yeah, you know, that kind of idea of revealing it, sort of like the Advent calendars at Christmas, you know, where you open the little thing and it reveals the next step, you know, or the next day towards, you know, the surprise towards Christmas or whatever. There's a whole lot of distraction going on here. Oh, you're fine. I'm glad you got a treat.
Waiting a while for this.
Very exciting. Please don't, you know, don't let it melt before you eat it. Yeah. Eat it now. All right, so we do teach the shapes in a very specific order. And we start off with the circle, the square, and the heart. And the next one that we introduce is the triangle. And when we introduce triangle, we talk about the fact that tri means 3, and a tricycle has 3 wheels, and a triangle has 3 sides. And when we introduce that, we're going to talk not only about sides, but we also want to introduce and talk about the word corner. I'm looking for my triangle. Sorry about that. Here it is. All right, we want to talk about the corner. Now, when I hold this up, if I were to hold it up like this, what's the first thing somebody's going to tell me?
It's upside down.
Absolutely, it's upside down. And I'm going to talk to them about the fact that it's not upside down. It's still a triangle, even if it's like this. What if I hold it like this? Is it still a triangle? Because it still has 3 sides. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3. All right, now we have corners. A corner is where 2 sides touch. Can you see that? Let's count our corners. 1, 2, 3. Those are called corners. Corners are where 2 sides touch. And you can talk about the corners of the room. You can talk about the corner of the wall. You can talk about the corner of your desk that 2 sides touch, or the corner of their paper. But we want to go ahead and be introducing that word and helping them to learn not just to count sides, but also to count corners. When they get into kindergarten, but even more so in 1st grade, they're really going to be introduced to that idea. Now in 1st grade, they have to start hearing that they're also called vertices. That's part of the new, you know, is that they have to be introduced to that word vertices. And so, you know, that's okay. We'll get there. But, you know, corners is enough for us at this age. We're certainly fine with that. All right. Then after we've gotten into triangle, then we're going to get into square and rectangle. As soon as you introduce rectangle, they've lost all of the shapes so far. Rectangle sounds like triangle, but it looks like a square. So it's the chameleon shape. My aunt, Miss Davis, who developed our curriculum, she tells a story when she's talking about it. And she teaches square first. And she talks about how Mr. Square, I'm going to get him. Oh, the back card. Of course, right? Mr. Square was driving along. And as he was riding along, he was doing so good and everything was good. And then all of a sudden there was a tree. And he wasn't looking where he was going, and Mr. Square drove along, and then he hit the tree. And when he hit the tree, he got all squished up, and he had a wreck, and he became a rectangle. Okay, so that's her little story about the rectangle is that he had the square had a rec and he became a rectangle.
It seems to me, because that's what I teach them.
Yeah, and by kindergarten, they have enough of a sense of puns to get that idea of rectangles. Now, do I think this would work with 2-year-olds? No. They're not, their use of language is not that sophisticated. It's not going to help them. But when we teach the rectangle and the square, I think it can be very helpful to get the unit blocks out of the block center. Because if you pull like this little square, half unit block, and you pull the regular sized 1 unit block, and you talk to them about the fact that this one is a square and this one is a rectangle, you can show them that when you turn the square, it's always the same. It doesn't change it. You can turn it and turn it and turn it, and it doesn't change. But when you turn the rectangle, it starts off tall, and then it gets fat, and then it gets tall, and then it gets fat. If you turn it and it gets taller or it gets fatter, then it's got to be a rectangle, okay? Then you can help them to learn it from that way. And of course, learning the difference between saying rectangle and triangle is really going to be all about the emphasis on the right part and about taking your time. If they, tangle, I mean, that happens, that angle, they can't tell the difference. They don't know the words. It's like the Ferdy. The all-purpose Ferdy. And umber. We got Ferdies and umbers and angles, right? We have like 4 months of the year that are umbers. Umber. All right. So then after that, after we get through rectangle, then we introduce diamond. And you can talk to them about the fact that diamonds have 4 sides. And count the sides and the corners with a diamond. For whatever reason, diamond is usually very easy for them to get. They don't have a problem with that one. That one is an easy one. You would think, well, it's another 4-sided, flat-sided shape, and yet they usually can get diamond pretty easily. And then after diamond, of course, then we introduce oval. And oval, I'm going to teach that one the same way that I taught the difference between rectangle and square. I'm going to put the circle right next to it, and I'm going to talk about it getting tall and it getting fat. That when I roll it, it gets tall or it gets fat. And a lot of times when people are talking about ovals, they give the egg as the example of an oval. And eggs are not ovals. No, there's a proper name for an egg, and at the moment I can't think of what it is for the shape of an egg where it's fatter on one end, and my brain has gone on the fritz and I can't think of it. But so we don't really want to use that as a sample, as an example for our oval, but it is good to take things into the room that are ovals and to look at them. And of course, the big thing that I always had, that I always took was a platter, like that your turkey goes on, and that it was, is it like compare it to a plate. It may be the same width as the plate, but look how long it is. And that would made it an easy way for them to, physically see the difference of it. Then we get into crescent, and crescent is really tricky because they want to say moon. They do. They want to say moon. And so it can be really helpful to bring in things that are crescent shaped that are not the moon. So if you want to bring in and make Pillsbury crescent rolls, that's a great time to do that. That's super fun to introduce it like that. Do you all know why croissants have the shape that they do? Does anybody? Yeah, it's meant to be a crescent, yes. Yes, but do you know why they wanted pastries that were crescent shaped? When the Moors came up from Africa, the Muslim Moors came up from Africa and they invaded Europe like through Spain and all, the crescent was the sign on their flag. And so the crescent roll was created as part of the, that conquering, with, what's his name that had the elephants? Went through the mountains with his elephants.
Napoleon. Wait, hold on. What?
Moorish conqueror, starts with an H. He came up through Spain. He conquered all through Spain. It's also where the phrase "let the cat out of the bag" came from. Hannibal. Yes. Thank you. It was Hannibal. Thank you. Oh, my brain just, yeah. All right, now I have to say, do you know where the phrase "let the cat out of the bag" came from? When the Moors conquered Spain, they made eating pork illegal because, of course, that's part of their religion is that they don't eat pork. But, of course, the Spanish people weren't Muslim by choice. They were Muslim, by force. And they still liked bacon. They still wanted to have pigs to eat. And so there was like a black market trade that went in on it, and you would like go to the meat market or whatever, and somebody would, sell you a pig in a bag, like a baby pig, for you to take home to butcher so you could have some of your pork or whatever. Well, pigs were hard to come by and expensive, and so occasionally you had somebody who was not so reputable and they didn't have a pig, so they'd put a cat in the bag instead and sell you that. And of course, when they're put into a bag and screeching, they sound pretty much the same. Apparently, I've never tried this on pigs or cats, but apparently you can trick people with this or whatever. So then they would get home and they would go to open their black market pig so they could have some bacon, and instead it was a cat. So they let the cat out of the bag. They showed the secret. So anyway, I know. Back when Sarah was in my junior high class, I had one of these kinds of "this is why" things that I did almost every day, and would come in and tell them. And you can tell how many of them have stuck because she's like, "Oh, I didn't know that." All right, so we got crescent. Then we introduce pentagon and octagon. Now, hexagon, usually we can teach pentagon and octagon and have them keep those two straight. But when you throw in hexagon, it messes all three of them up, and it's hard. And of course, with that, then you're going to have to teach how to count sides. When you teach pentagon, there is an easy way to distinguish the pentagon. And again, this is a time when having these as a three-dimensional shape and not just a flat one on the card can really be helpful. All right, but when you look at hexagon and octagon, no matter which way you turn them, there's always a flat side at the top. See, the sides are parallel. So, if you're on this side, it's still flat at the top. And if you're on this side, it's still flat at the top, okay? And same thing with octagon, because it's an even number of sides, then it's flat at the top and it's flat at the bottom. Or if you're using that as your base, it's flat at the top and flat at the bottom. But when you look at a pentagon, no matter which way you turn it, which side, there's always a point at the top of the pentagon. Okay, when it's flat on the bottom, there's a point at the top of the pentagon. So you're going to put one side down, and there's always a point. Now that can help to keep pentagon separated from the other two. Now you can talk about octagon and octopus. And if you've done octopuses and you've talked about the fact that octopuses have 8 legs, then you may very well be able to introduce octagon, octopus, and talk about that 8 over and over again. And of course, I would love to say that October is the 8th month, but the Romans got a hold of the calendar and inserted, they inserted, June and July, yes, and so now, October is the 10th month, but, originally it was the 8th month. But we do put those 3 together, and we put those 3 together because it is easier to learn to separate things that are similar if you put them right next to each other. So, for example, if I were going to teach a child the difference between a cow and a horse, right? And it's a child who's never seen one up close. What they see are animals in a field, right? And we're driving down the road and we look over there and they see cows. And then we look over here and we see horses. Can they tell the difference between those two? No. They call them, either all cows or they're all horses. They have no idea. They're animals in a field, and they're the same, right? But if I take them and show them an animal up close, this is a horse and this is a cow, and I start talking about the horses, they have manes, that's hair that's on their neck, and look at their long tails. It's like a ponytail. It's very full, and a ponytail in our hair is called a ponytail because the ponies have tails of hair just like that. If we do all of that and we go through and we show those things and we point out those differences and we look at the difference of the length of the neck and the way that the head is shaped and that the cow has horns and the horse does not. When I show them all those individual differences, then would they be able to tell the difference between a cow and a horse? Absolutely. Absolutely. So whenever we have something like that that's going to be tricky, that's got subtle differences between the two of them, then we put them next to each other to see the differences. And this is true even in adulthood. I can't tell you whether your drink is a small or a medium or a large unless I've seen the other choices, right? I have to know what the other options are, and then I can tell you which one that is. And if I do know it off the top of my head, I know it because I have the reference sizes, the other options. I've seen them before. They're in my head, so I can tell that she's got a Route 44 cup. But it was hers a small or a medium or a large. Her Frosty, I have no idea.
What size is it, Clark? This one's called regular.
It's a regular. That's going to be a medium. All right. So then from there, after we get through with those, then we've got shamrock. And oftentimes, shamrock to me is a seasonal shape. So I may skip forward if we're not to it by March, and I don't have a shamrock in this set. If we're not to it by St. Patrick's Day, I will skip forward and get it. Because at St. Patrick's Day, I want to be able to talk about shamrocks, and I want to be able to talk about that each part of it represents part of the Holy Trinity. And we've got God the Father and Jesus the Son and the Holy Spirit. Yes, ma'am.
If you've already taught it before that, but you taught it with the Trinity, is that okay?
Yeah. And then I'm going to bring it back up.
Okay.
Whenever we get to St. Patrick's Day, I also start talking about missions work. And that, that was a way that St. Patrick brought news of Jesus, to the Irish was that he used the shamrock as an example. And that, and I always use St. Patrick's Day as a feed in to the idea of missionary work, and being a missionary, and spreading Jesus's word. And then, of course, usually Easter falls just after that, so then we can talk about what missionaries are going to teach. They're going to teach about that Jesus died on the cross for our sins. So they kind of feed into each other. Yes, ma'am.
How far do you expect them to get with shapes by the end of the year? All of them?
No.
Okay.
Certainly not with your kids.
We got to Pentagon. We got to Pentagon.
Oh, that's great. And if they really know through Pentagon, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, we were just starting Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
They know Crescent.
But yeah, I mean, if you got, yeah, that's great. That's perfect. Mm-hmm. That's really, really good. I would say that in the 3-year-old year, that if we get all the way through rectangle and they can really tell you those shapes, that they're doing good. Now you've got old 3s, which really aren't that much different than young 4s. So you got way further. But yeah, that's excellent.
Most of, 90% of my class was 4
Mm-hmm.
by January.
Yeah, but it's still, I mean, those are young kids. You did very well with them. So good job. That's great. No, and in fact, if you actually manage to get through all of the shapes that I have here, then I need to add more shapes to it. Because shapes are like colors. If you run out of them and you don't have a new one, then we as teachers get distracted. And we don't have anything new to teach. And we didn't become teachers because we like to review. We became teachers because we like to teach. And so the idea here is to always have a plentiful supply, that there's always more that you can teach. And I do have one that I need to add, and this is Miss Peavy has it in hers, and that's the shape of the state of Texas. And so I do need to add that to our sets. But you know, when we get to Go Texan Day and the Western Day of the rodeo and all, that would be the time to introduce the shape of the state of Texas. And I mean, what a great shape to add to it. Yes, ma'am.
So it has to be taught in this order?
The seasonal shapes, you can introduce those, you know, whenever the season comes about. But in general, yes, we like them taught in this order.
Because I taught arrow after, I want to say.
Yes.
Rectangle because of the bike track.
Well, arrow, usually I introduce arrow very, very early because we use it in Distar and it says go this way. That we have to introduce the arrow and it says go this way. So as soon as we're getting to the point in Distar that we're talking about go this way, I'm going to leap forward and get arrow. I may not add it to my shapes at that point, but I may go ahead and do it. But you're absolutely right. The bike track, the Distar, there are many times when knowing that an arrow tells you to go a certain way is going to be helpful. Another set of the logo recognition cards that I've been working on are street signs, a stop sign, a yield sign, and a speed limit sign, an exit sign, a do not enter, and then included in that, I went ahead and included the symbol for the men's room, the ladies' room, the handicapped symbol, there was something else I was thinking there. But yeah, I should probably go ahead and put an arrow, like a traffic arrow in there as well, because you absolutely, that's going to be something that they can encounter in daily life, but that has, a meaning to it. And so, yeah, that's a very good point that yes, you can go back and get that arrow whenever it is that you're introducing those, or teaching. Let's see. The other ones that you may want to get out of order, the cross and the egg, I introduce those at Easter, regardless of whether or not I'm to them. They're good shapes for them to have. We have a parallelogram and the rhombus and the trapezoid that are included in our sets. And with that, you're going to end up, we talk about the fact that the parallelogram is a rectangle that fell over. The rhombus is a square that fell over. The trapezoid is a triangle that somebody cut the top off of it. They cut the top off and we got trapped because there's no point to get out. So it's a trapezoid because you're trapped. But with that, I want to point out that you are going to have children who have been taught that the proper name for this shape is not a diamond, but is instead a rhombus. And they'll get introduced to that concept of this being the example of the rhombus when they get into first grade. We'll talk about the fact that this is also a rhombus. And it's a rhombus because it's got, two sides that are parallel here and two sides that are parallel here. If one of your kids calls it that, you can tell them, yes, that's true. That's also a rhombus. It's also, technically it's also a trapezoid. A parallelogram. If they bring that up, then yes, that's another example of it. But we're going to call it a diamond.
Also a polygon.
Yes. Most of them are polygons. Yeah. Thank you, math teacher. It's also a two-dimensional flat black shape, yeah, on a card. But yes, they're going to, occasionally you'll have a child who comes from a program where they've already introduced that word or their parent has introduced it, and that's what they're going to call it, and that's fine. If they do, it's technically true and it's technically right, and let them, give them credit for it, let them say that. We have a convention of how we do things here, and of course I ask all of you to follow that convention. But there are other ways and means, and other schools do things in different ways. And we don't want to correct children for saying something that is true, but does not follow our convention, if that makes sense. And so, if a child says something like that, like the rhombus and all that, just let it be. It's okay. You don't have to go 12 rounds and argue with them. An example of this is our 5th grade history book, and it talks about it's a world history book, so it's history of man from Bible times forward, and in it, when they start talking about the Sahara and the Middle East and the Fertile Crescent and the Tigris and Euphrates and ancient history of man, and all, when they introduce the Sahara, they introduce it as the largest desert in the world. Well, this year I had a child who raised her hand and said that's not true. The largest desert in the world is Alaska. Okay, technically she's right. Alaska is the largest desert in the world. But most people don't think of it because it's not an arid desert. But there's not water in a usable form, so technically it is a desert. It has ice and snow, and that's water in a solid state, but that's... Anyway. And so she and the teacher kind of went, a few rounds about this or whatever. Because the teacher was like, well, our book says this, and the right answer on the test is going to be this. And so that's what you need to answer when they ask the question on the test, And I get the teacher's point that she's right, that on the test, when they ask that question, you're going to need to write Sahara. I also get the child's point that, a fact is a fact and truth is truth, and, Anyway, so it got brought to me because we had to know how to settle this difference, and of course my thing was to acknowledge the fact that she's right, and then to tell her that I want you just to pretend like it says the world's largest arid desert is, and we'll go on from there, and we can tell the teacher to put a little caret in their textbooks and write the word arid when it says it in the fact, and we're going to make that correction going forward, and yeah. Okay, again, we don't need to correct kids when they're right, but we do need to come together as a group and decide what we're looking for in those answers. All right, then, so we have target, we have semicircle, and with this one, I want to be sure that you show them upside down, sideways, flat side down, that they can identify it, that it's still a semicircle no matter which way you turn it. And in fact, we want to do that with all of our shapes, as we want to make sure that, is it still a semicircle? Yes. Is it still a semicircle? Yes. Is it still a semicircle? Yes. With that one, you're going to point out the difference between a semicircle and an arc. And those are tricky for them. But usually what I do is I try to get the blocks off the shelf that have those two and it fits inside it. That's really nice that you can show that the semicircle, fits inside the arc. And so, again, this is one of those things where having a three-dimensional, object can help. And here, of course, did we talk about cross already? When we talk about cross, the cross that we have here, it was very specifically chosen because it doesn't have the same like portrait orientation that a traditional Christian cross does. And we want to be sure and introduce them to the idea that they're both crosses, even if they're not. And then we introduced the idea of chevrons a few years back because this pattern became very popular. And of course, it does help when you get to Chevron gas station if they know that shape is a chevron, and goes with that. Then we have the ring, and you can talk about that a semicircle is a circle cut in half, and the arc is the ring cut in half. And we can put a ring on your finger, and we can make a ring with us, and it's open in the middle, and that makes it a ring, and we can play ring around the rosy, and so on and so forth. And then of course we've got arrow, which we talked about previously. It looks like this set does not have a shamrock, an egg. And we saw Target. Yeah, I think that's it. A shamrock and an egg.
I didn't have a shamrock and egg in there. I had another shamrock in the classroom that I used, but not that one.
Yeah, well, when I made this set, I may have forgotten to put those shapes in it because it was an updated set. So that may be an oversight on my part. Okay, and we are at the end of shapes, and we are right up against the end of our time. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, complaints? Anything that doesn't start with a K sound? Okay, then I guess we are good for the day. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. I really appreciate it. And I will see you next week. Oh, you know what I forgot? Name recognition. So be sure, and I'm just going to put it right here so that I don't forget it when we come back.